session called Better Together, Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, and Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement. In this session, we're going to explore the dual right capabilities between finance and operations and customer engagement. Specifically on the customer engagement side of things, the sales, project operations, and field service integration options. Although you can extend dual right if you're using customer service or one of the other workloads. I'll talk a little bit about the configuration of dual right and how that works, and then give you a little bit of a transaction overview so you can see it in action. And then we'll end up talking about some of the things that you have to consider when implementing dual right in your environment. So Microsoft started off with dual right and developing dual right with these objectives in mind: to improve efficiency and better visibility, improved user experience. And they did that through a variety of things. So they did that through the use of Dataverse tables, which customer engagement natively uses. But this enables offline mode capabilities and other types of things. The real-time visibility to be able to see if you're a distribution company, what are my inventory levels? What do I have available to sell? Or if I'm a field service customer, what parts do I have in stock that I can use for some sort of preventative or reactive repair? And then on the enhanced accuracy or the user experience, being able to see if for some reason something fails, why did it fail, allow you to go ahead and correct that transaction and resubmit. So the results there, we have those retry options that I was just talking about there. Primary tables, such as like our products table, customers, vendors, etc., those are kept in sync. While it's real time, as Microsoft calls it, it's near real time. I mean, it's within a fraction of a second or so, but they're kept in sync, and we don't have to worry about export, import, and all those things that come along with that. So the last thing is that improved user experience or the enhanced accuracy. Without an integration, we're going to have to enter information, duplicated information in one system or the other. So if I didn't have, for example, my products integrated, if I create a new product in finance and operations, and I'm going to stock that, I'm going to put that in various warehouses, etc., I'm going to have to replicate or re-enter that information over in customer engagement. And as soon as you do that, you're introducing the probability of error. I mistype something, or I forget to do it, and now we have a problem. So this kind of solves for that, as well as passing information in real time so that we can get better revenue reporting on the finance and operations side of things, or cost reporting, however you look at that. So let's talk about some of the capabilities that dual right has based upon the customer engagement modules. So F&O and Dynamics 365 Sales integrate, and you can see here some of the native maps that come along with dual right. So customers on the finance and operations side of things are synced to Dynamics 365 as accounts, because in customer engagement, accounts are a company. So an account can be a vendor, it can be a customer. All of that is determined based upon the relationship type value of the account in customer engagement. But we also have products and pricing. So one of the things to consider there, and I'm not trying to get way ahead of myself because we're going to talk about considerations later, is currently in the out-of-the-box maps, pricing is controlled in finance and operations, and we've seen with some clients that they want to have pricing controlled inside Dynamics 365 Sales. So don't worry, it's possible to do that. And we can help with that as far as showing you how to alter the maps and the flow of the maps, etc., that reverses that flow and allows pricing to move into finance and operations. And then you can see some of the other transactions there. So if, once again, using that distribution example, I might have my quotes synchronized because I might consider that into my sales and operational planning as far as replenishment of maybe long lead items that we have and so on. And you may say that you don't use quotes in that planning process, you only use orders, which is fine. So you can turn off that map. You don't have to use that. But otherwise, orders are going to come across. And you can see that they're bidirectionally synced. But in this case, once an order is submitted from Dynamics 365 Sales over to Finance and Operations. Finance and Operations controls that order at that point in time. It becomes the system of record of that. But any updates to the sales order that happen on the F&O side of things, those are passed back so the users in Dynamics 365 Sales can see real time, what's going on with that particular sales order, especially if they're customer facing and the customers are calling them and asking them questions about, the status of their order, etc. And then finally, invoices feeding from Finance and Operations. Once we pick, pack, ship, and send that, the invoices would be available over in D365 Sales. Now, if your sales users don't need that invoice information, you don't have to enable that map. You can just turn that off and the information does not flow. So let's transition over to project operations. I mean, this is a lot of functionality because project operations becomes it's a little bit more complex. But you can see some of the things like the lead opportunity quote side of things. All of that functionality is within project operations. But then we have our contracts and project ops that are feeding to project contracts and so on in F&O. And then we're going through the life cycle of a project where we're staffing resources. Those resources feed from F&O over to project ops, etc. So a little bit more detail around some of those things is you can see here that our contract feeds to the project contract, our lines go to the contract lines, etc. So all of that is happening within Dataverse and feeding over to F&O. But if your process is that you set those up in F&O first and pass them back over to project operations, that's totally fine. Just like I said on the sales side of things, the flow can be reversed, and that's all based upon your business processes. So a couple other things as far as the transactional side of things, we have our various tasks or activities, if you will. So these are like time entries and other things that are feeding across. All of those are syncing up once again from Project Ops over to F&O. So things like milestone billing. Typically we see a project manager is responsible for indicating that a milestone has been achieved, and then sending that information over to accounting so that accounting can actually invoice the customer for that milestone payment. Or in the case where there has to be some revenue recognition or so on, it's indicating we've achieved that milestone and that revenue can be recognized. So all of this is controlled by the project managers that are using project operations. They mark a transaction saying it's ready for invoice or ready for recognition, and then updates the proper transactions over on the F&O side of things where accounting personnel can continue the process and take it to the finish line. Moving on here to the field service integration side of things. So in field service, work orders are passed over to projects in finance and operations. And what happens is when we create a work order over in the field service side of things, we associate it to a project in F&O. And what it does is it creates a sub-project underneath that F&O master project. And then that's where we go ahead and book our expenses, hours, and items. And I'll talk about that in just one second here. So if you're using field service, you know that in field service, the work order products and services, we see those basically on the same line, the same transaction, if you will, or the same transaction record. And our products can be inventoried or non-inventoried. And so this is where that attribute, inventory, non-inventory, determines on the F&O side of things where the journal is written. So if it's an inventory item, it's written into the item journal against the project. If it's non-inventory, it goes to the expense journal. And then certainly on the services side of things, because that's labor that we're collecting, whether that's billable or non-billable, it's going to the hours journal against the project in F&O. So one of the things that the field service integration does is it builds on some of the existing integrations for the two products or the two dual right solutions that I talked about previously. So in the case of distribution and D365 sales, we need warehouses to be able to see our inventory levels and so on. Assets, asset categories are going to come across. Our payment and shipping terms are needed for invoice support, as well as sales order support. But we also have some purchase order and receipts and so on that goes along with that. And so in project operations, we have what project operations natively calls subcontracts. They're basically purchase orders. So those feed across to the PO module inside F&O, and they're processed over there. Same thing on the field service side of things. Now, field service calls purchase orders, but it rides on some of those existing maps from the two solutions that I talked about previously. So let's transition now that we have a little bit of a base foundation of what dual write does with the various customer engagement modules. Let's talk about some of the configuration and then look at some of the transactional capabilities. So configuration, while dual write is actually inside F&O, and that's where it's administered, it does require some enablement in the Power Platform Admin Center, which is where customer engagement normally is. And so when you're getting ready to deploy dual write, you will need to go to the Power Platform Admin Center. You'll need admin rights for that. So this is not F&O administrators, this is Power Platform administration rights. So you may need to go ahead and get some additional permissions from your IT group or engage the IT group to do this. So within the Power Platform Admin Center, we have various solutions, and those solutions are added just going through that install app button that you see at the top of that screenshot there. And we can pull those in and deploy them. Now, as they're going along, and as you kind of the care and feeding and the normal life cycle of dual write with F&O and CE, you'll see, and I purposely kind of picked this screenshot so that you could see that periodically you're going to need to go ahead and process updates. While you can opt into automatic updates for like the wave releases and so on, some of these things, especially around the integration side of things, you're going to have to deliberately go through the deployment process. And there's kind of a method to the madness, if you will, is that we want to make sure that we do this maybe in a test environment first, make sure that there's not going to be any negative impact based upon the update, and then go ahead and do the same thing and deploy that into production, but do so at a time that's not going to be disruptive to the business, because it will take a few minutes or so for the update to happen, and we want to make sure that we're not processing that update when there's major transactions feeding across. So the other thing on the configuration side of things, in the case with field service, the dual write integration also needs to be enabled within the actual module itself, the field service module. And you can kind of see here, this is on the field service settings screen, that there's a little toggle to turn that on. And so by turning that on, it also deploys some of the additional forms within field service that enable the fields that F&O exposes through dual write that we're going to need. So namely, like on the work order, it'll include a lookup to the project. And in some of the other records itself, it'll also enable additional capabilities. So you don't have to go through and do any form modifications to enable those. It'll happen automatically by clicking that toggle and saving it, and it'll take a minute or two to process as well. So in F&O, all of the configuration of dual write, or the administration of dual write, is done through the data management area of F&O. And you can kind of see here the third tile before the last tile on the right. Sorry, that's the horrible description of how to get to it. But you can see if you just count 3 from the right, you'll see dual write. And it allows us to go into dual write and look at these maps. Now, those maps will be part of the deployment process, and there's some great Microsoft Learn articles out there. We can also help you with that. So, let us know if you need some assistance. But all of these maps allow us to go ahead and determine which maps we want to run. So remember the example I gave you around quoting. If we don't want quoting turned on, we're going to make sure that it's not running, or we didn't turn it on and initialize it and get it running and going. And then we can also drill into each one of these maps, and then we can determine the flow of what data flows to which side. So if you look at this list of like customer account to account number, the city to the address city, etc., in that middle column, the map type column, you'll see an equal sign or two little lines. I mean, it's actually two little arrows that are pointing, that indicates that information is flowing bidirectionally. So if we change something on the CE side of things, like we change the city, it's going to flow back to F&O, and then vice versa. We change it in F&O, it's going to flow over to CE. So some of the things that you may want to consider is when you're reviewing these maps, based upon your business processes, do you want to allow CE to control certain fields? And if so, we're going to change the flow. So the greater than signs that you see down by latitude, longitude, they're passing from one direction to the other. So a greater than sign with F&O on the left column, CE on the right, indicates that F&O is passing that value over to CE. And then a less than sign indicates it goes from CE over to F&O. So you can adjust these maps based upon your business rules regarding specific fields. So, an example of that is like customer credit limit. I may not want a CE user to be able to change that value on the account record, because that's something that accounting controls, and accounting works in finance and operations on a regular basis. So, those are some of the things to consider as you're going through the mapping side of things. The other thing is there are filters. So as I said before, customer engagement has accounts, and those accounts can represent vendors, it can represent customers, it can represent other companies. And so the way that these maps work, so in the case here, like this customer map, is it's only picking up records, account records on the CE side, the customer engagement side, where the customer type code, that's the logical name. We don't see that name on the form, we see relationship type by default. And so this is indicating that the relationship type is equal to a 3, which means it's a customer, which is the 3 is the equivalent of customer that we see there. So you may want to consider this. So if you break up, like we break up customers between, new customers have been with us for under 12 months, and existing customers, because we need that for reporting purposes, customers have been with us for longer than 12 months, we'll have two different values. So we'd have to say that it's equal to these two values there. So some of the things to look at as you're configuring is, do you need to adjust any of the default filters that are going along with it? So we pivot over to the transactional side of things, and so we can see here the account record in customer engagement now has a couple of new fields. So if you've used customer engagement for a while but not yet with dual right, you'll see company and customer group ID. Those field values are automatically, those fields are automatically deployed by flipping that toggle on the field service setup. And then the values themselves are fed through dual right into these Dataverse tables that are used for these various lookup fields. So we have those values at the account level. And then if we look at like the work order side of things, you'll see at the very bottom F&O project. That's also where, in that last example of field service, it ties the work order to a specific project. So in this case, this work order is tied to project 911-02, and then it's going to open up sub-projects with the work order number underneath that. So as we go along, that example that I gave you about the work order products, some being inventory, some being non-inventory, those items that we have on the work order are being fed back over to project operation, or to F&O. So when we first create a work order, if it has some defaulted products on it that are in an estimated status, you can see that status over there on the right hand side. What that's going to do is it's going to push over these pending item journals or expense journals for use in planning purposes. So there's demand that's being pushed into F&O for planning purposes. If we don't use them, there's a cleanup process at the end that'll take those out. But if we do go and push those in, so this is the example of those item journals being written across so that we see those, they're not posted. And there's no need to manually go ahead and post these, because as we go through the process and using those items, we'll see that the posting happens automatically. So anytime we're looking at non-posted item journals, are only the items or the products on the work order side of things that have not yet been used. So all of this information goes feeding across from the work order into F&O. Now, on field service, natively, we have products and we have warehouses, but we don't have locations or bins. And so once again, at that bottom field there, you can see that that's a new field that's been exposed to support the additional capabilities that F&O has. So if you are using locations in F&O, when you put that product onto a work order, it'll not only require the warehouse, but also what location or bin you're pulling it from. And then also over on the right-hand side, that line property will indicate whether this is a billable item or a non-billable item. So it gives you the flexibility to go ahead and indicate that. And you can set up your defaults depending on what your business rules are and everything else. So some of the implementation considerations. So one, there is a legacy integration between Dynamics 365 Sales and F&O. That integration is not compatible with dual write. So, if you have that in place and you're looking to use dual write, you're going to have to remove that integration from your environment before deploying the dual write integration, because they're incompatible with one another. The other thing is that project operations and field service both talk to the projects module in F&O. So if you're using both of those CE modules, you're going to need different companies within F&O because you can't deploy both the project operations dual write maps and the field service dual write maps into that same environment. Because there'll be a collision. It doesn't know where to write it. If I have a work order, now what project do I write it to? And project operations is also trying to write to the same table. So, something to consider there. And we can give you some more information about that if you'd like to follow up with us. So on the CE side of things, legal entities. That's not a native customer engagement. An engagement feature. So when you have the same product in multiple legal entities in F&O, you're going to have multiple product records in CE. So naming conventions becomes important. I showed you the account screen and how there's a company field on that, and that makes it a unique record. So if you have global customers and they work with multiple F&O companies, there's some considerations around there. And then assets is another thing that needs to be considered as far as if you have assets in multiple companies that are feeding over and doing some sort of maintenance on the field service side of things. And you can accomplish this through, as I said before, naming conventions, also views in CE to filter things by company. So you're looking specifically at the correct records at that point in time. But because products are going to be company specific, you also have to think about things in terms of CE price lists, because price lists go ahead and collect products, and then those products we can go ahead and put the pricing in for those. So you can see my convention here. USMF is a demonstration F&O company, so my price lists have the company prepended onto the price list description, so I can pick the proper one. Because if I have products for, say, a different company on the same price list, when dual write tries to integrate those over to F&O into that company, it's going to fail because it's trying to cross different companies in F&O and they might not be supported. So the same thing on incident types, because incident types are a collection of products. You're going to want to consider naming conventions there. And then resources is also something to consider, and that's kind of the final thing to consider as far as legal entities, because resources, once again, also are company specific. So you can see this bookable resource that might be used in project operations or field service. There is a company field there. So if you have the same resource that operates in multiple companies, once again, naming convention or something like that to handle that. And we can give you some advice on how to handle those things. Oops. So field service, non-inventory products, one of the things to consider is those products, because they go over to the projects module in F&O and they go to the expense journal, it requires a project category. And at least as of today, that project category is not natively populated by the map. So as you add non-inventory items, you're going to want to go onto either the sales, field service, project ops side of things, and you'll see a new field, and you can see it here in this screenshot, project category, and pick the appropriate category because that's how some of the GL treatment is handled on the F&O side of things, which is based upon that category there. The other thing on field service specifically is fixed assets and the asset records themselves. These are not fixed asset records. These are asset management records. And so sometimes we get calls where a client is saying, well, I added a new asset, but it's not showing up on the field service side of things. And it's because they've added the fixed asset, but they haven't created an asset management record. So the only records from F&O that come across in field service is asset management records. Now, in F&O, you probably already know this, those two can be linked, and that's important because we might want to pass large overhauls which might extend the useful life of an asset, or we're going to increase the cost of the asset and depreciate that over the remaining life. Those become important there. And so these two things can be linked together, but just note that if you're going to use field service and you want assets from F&O, they have to be asset management records. And then lastly, as far as master records, things like that, is offline mobile consideration. So Microsoft is working on virtual Dataverse tables, and there's a few. So like the real-time inventory is available via virtual Dataverse tables. And what that means is basically providing like a window into field service or into F&O to see what's happening. But these virtual tables, you can't go offline with them. So if you are using any of the offline mobile capabilities of customer engagement, you're not going to be able to use the native virtual Dataverse tables because we don't have any offline support, at least as of right now. Microsoft's working on it. They haven't released it yet. But we figured that out. So if that is something that you need to consider, please see us after the conference. We're happy to talk to you about that and give you some additional thoughts there. So some of the other things outside of master records, all customer engagement users need integration user access rights. It doesn't give them any privileges as far as additional features that they can access or anything like that, but it allows them to submit transactions or master records that the integration will then pick up. So you're going to want to make sure that you have integration user rights or roles assigned to all of your users. And then your system administrators are going to want that integration admin role assigned to them. So they have the ability to go in and take a look at those things. So hopefully this was informative and helpful. I know it's kind of a quick review of the capabilities of dual write with customer engagement. Happy to address any questions here with the time we have remaining. And then if not, I've thrown out a few times, we're happy to help you with some things. Here's all of our contact information, but have a great rest of the conference, and thank you for your time today.